Hey everyone, this is Brittany Bly from Pop Shop America. Today I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about cross stitch. We're going to use this really cool Ruth Bader Ginsburg cross stitch kit. So this is great for beginners or even if you've done this before. So let's go ahead and open up this kit and see what's inside. So this kit has everything you need to complete this project from beginning to end. So let's just go ahead and pull this all out, check it out, and get to know our supplies. And here we go. So the first thing is this embroidery hoop. So this is going to be the size of our finished piece. And what this does is we just put the cloth inside of that hoop in between these two pieces, and that's going to help pull this fabric tight. It's going to make it easier to stitch. This is Aida Fabric, and if you notice it has this really cool pattern to it, we're actually going to be stitching inside of all of these little holes. We've got lots of different colors of embroidery floss. So this thread that we have right here is also called floss. Everything is labeled, which makes it nice and easy. We've got our embroidery needle right here. The difference between an embroidery needle and a different type of needle is that the eye is actually going to be a little bit bigger with this, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to fit this floss into the needle. Last, we have this pattern right here. Now, cross stitch is all about counting. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow this pattern, and we're going to count each square as an individual stitch, working our way through all of these different colors to fill it in and make this overall image, right? So it's all about counting. Now you might notice that there's a star right here. This star on the pattern actually shows us where the center of the pattern is. This, in most cross stitch, is going to be your starting point. This is going to make counting each square so much easier starting in the center. So let's go ahead and get our supplies ready, and we'll get started with our first stitch. Now you might have noticed that our fabric came sort of pre-folded, which is actually great. We always want to fold our fabric into quarters before we get started, and just make sure to give it a nice hard crease, because just like that center point in our pattern, we want to mark the center point on the fabric. That's our starting point, so we want to know where it is on the fabric. Then we just unfold it, open up this hoop, and we're going to place the fabric in between these two rings. Sometimes this takes a little bit of maneuvering, so don't worry too much if you have to kind of wiggle the fabric and move it around a little bit to get it in the perfect position. So here we go. That actually looks really good. That's nice and flat. So we want this to be as flat and as taut as possible. The more flat and taut the fabric is, the better your finished cross stitch is going to look. So all I'm doing is I just held this in place. Now I'm turning this piece back closed. If you notice any wobbles or warps in your fabric, you can just tug it from the back to flatten it. As you're tightening it, the more that you tighten it and then give it a little bit of tug, that's going to help it get flatter and flatter, especially through these center parts that always bunch a little bit. And we just tighten this as much as we can. We want these two pieces, this exterior wood and the interior wood, to be about as even height-wise as possible so that this is nice and flat. So you can also just push on those wood pieces back and forth. And now we are ready to prep our needle. All right, so now that our fabric is ready, our embroidery hoop is prepped, we want to now prep our needle. So just pull this out, And again, remember that the eyelet on an embroidery needle is going to be a little bit bigger, which makes it a little bit easier to work with for this. And usually the needle point is fairly dull. This is actually quite dull, which is perfect. We don't need a sharp needle because we're going to be stabbing the needle through these little holes. So it's not poking through fabric itself, it's just going in between the pieces of fabric. So I'm just going to set this right here. And then I want to get my pattern ready. I want to look at this pattern again, and I want to think about what color I'm going to start with, how I'm going to put this whole piece together.
Let's say that again. Yeah.
I want to pull out this pattern, consider all of the different colors that make up this total image. Think about our starting point, and that's going to help me plan the order of my stitches and the order of colors that I'm going to work with. Because the center point is this light peach color, that's definitely going to be the easiest way to start. And if you look, most of this interior right here is that light peach color. So again, that's a great starting point. And then we just want to think about how many stitches on each row there are in any given direction with that light peach. So I'll show you this in real time, but planning your colors is very important because you want to know what floss to put on your needle first. So let's just put this pattern to the side. Let's find the correct color and go ahead and open up all of this floss that we have right here. And we've got this light peach right up here. So all we need is one strand of this. So I'm going to hold the rest in place. I'm going to pull out this one strand and put the rest of the colors to the side. Now this is really great. One thing you might notice about embroidery floss is that it's actually made up of all of these tiny strands of floss. Anytime we're working with cross stitch, we always want to start with one strand. So we just pull out one strand of floss from this group, put the rest of the floss to the side, and this is the piece that we're going to work with. We're going to double it over. The way that we do that is we find both ends of this single strand of floss, put them together. So now both ends of the floss are touching, and I'm just going to pull the other side of the floss until I find the loop, the middle point of that floss on the other end. Put that loop in between my fingers, grab my embroidery needle, find the middle point that's on the other side of those two ends, then you take your embroidery needle and just loop this through the embroidery needle eye. So this is always a bit of a challenge. If this is hard, you can get it a little bit wet. That usually does the trick. Get right in there so that you're nice and close to the work that you're doing. Once you get the loop through, just pull it a little bit so that you just have a little bit of space right there on the loop. Push your needle through it so that you're making a little knot around the end of the needle. Now I've got two strands right here. Both ends are completely open, and the thread is actually tighter on the needle at the head of the needle. And this is going to make it so much easier to work with, so you don't have to worry too much about losing the needle from the thread or anything like that. And now you are ready to get started. We are going to get started with the first stitch. The stitch is going to move from the back side to the front. So I want to make sure that I know where my center point is, right? The center point here is going to represent this center point here. Now that I kind of have an idea of where that is, you can even needle it to make it a little bit wider. Just flip it over. and put your needle just partially through and then flip it again to the front to make sure it's in the right place. Now once you know that it's in the right place, so I feel good about this, I'm going to flip it to the back again because I want to make sure that I hold the tail in place, right? So these ends right here, I don't want to accidentally pull them through. So I'm just going to hold it when it's about an inch long, like so. Flip it again. Now I'm doing 2 stitches, right? I've got 2 stitches right here. So I'm going from lower left to upper right. Flip it back. Now hold on to that tail, and we're just going 1 below. Holding that tail in place, 1 below. Pull your thread through, and now you're starting to hold that tail in place. Now it's going to take a few stitches for it to hold, but this is a really good start. So again, that stitch is going to go from lower left to upper right. Again, that stitch is going to go from lower left to upper right. I've got 2 stitches on this row. 1, 2, and now we're just going to go back across through those stitches. I'm actually going to pull it just a little bit on both sides because I did notice that that stitch right there was just slightly loose, so we can just pull it taut. Now I'm going to go back through the bottom, and I'm going to finish those 2 stitches. Once I finish these 2 stitches, then I'm going to have to move on to a different section of this pattern. So we always want to keep our pattern in front of us, refer back to it so that we know what to do next. So I just went from lower right to upper left, flip it over, back down, lower right to upper left. So the first half of the stitch is lower left to upper right. Now it's lower right to upper left. So we've got these 2 finished, so we're just going to go ahead and move up to the row above it. There's actually this little stitch right here, but you know what? I'm going to include this stitch when I'm working on the bottom section. Right now, I'm going to do this top section. I'm going to use this area as my border. Do this top section right here. So I'm going to go up 1 and over 1 to the left. So that is going to be right here, right? So see how I was just searching for that with my needle? Once I find it, I'm going lower left to upper right. I'm going to do all 4 of the first half of my stitch. Then I'm going to go back through and do the second half of the stitch. So now I'm going 1 down on the back side, and then lower left to upper right 4 times in a row. Now again, lower left to upper right. Now we've got 3 in a row. Flip it over, go back down, 1 below. Now this is our last stitch in this row, in this part of the section. Here we go. Now look at that. Now we're going to go back through the other side in the other direction and finish those stitches. So again, I have those 2 right here that I started with, and now I'm working on the row above it. I'm moving through this pattern horizontally and then up. So I just do 1 below. Now the second half of the cross stitch is lower right to upper left. which makes a cute little X pattern. Lower right to upper left, then back down. Keep it nice and taut so that our X's look really pristine. Now we've just got a couple more. And we just keep flipping this back and forth. One below on the back side. Lower right to upper left. That finishes our last stitch right there. So now we just want to refer back to our pattern and think about what we're going to do next. So I would actually recommend that we skip over this one darker spot, and let's go ahead and start filling in this cheekbone here, right? There's just one little stitch that's a different color, so it's really easy to skip over that section, and then we'll continue right here. Now to skip over that one stitch, we just want to have our hoop facing forward, so right side up. I have my needle on the back side and I'm just searching for the correct place. So just kind of poke it through until you find it. If you have any trouble, like I'm kind of struggling to find it, then you can sort of get started. Like this one's probably right. Let's see. Oh, nailed it. Great. So that's our spot right there where we want to needle it. But here's the thing, right? This is 1 over, so we're just using this to mark it. Because if you remember, our cross stitch is lower left to upper right, then lower right to upper left. So we're actually just moving one more, right? So I'm just marking that spot. Now I'm starting the actual stitch, lower left to upper right. There we go. And back through. Now I'm on the back side, and I'm just gonna go down one. And lower right to upper left. All right, so now that we have that spot marked, we could actually keep going. We could even do this because now we're working from right to left instead of left to right. We could actually start that stitch, lower right to upper left, continue all the way across through all of these stitches, then go back through to finish them, then move one up, right? So now that we have this spot marked, it's just a little bit easier to go ahead and continue. And so we'll keep stitching.